So one of the things I wanted to talk about is the truth of the claim. Besides the utility or the benefits that come from saying it, is it true? You mentioned one place for us to know this, and that is we can know it through customary international law. In other words, lots of other people are saying it, and that's a reason to think it might be true. Is that the only way or the best way to understand the idea of the child having a right to his or her parents? Or are there other ways of thinking about it?
Good. This is another layer, another level of questioning we don't usually get. So the way I usually answer that question is, well, we know it's true because when we look at studies, right, studies show that statistically, biological parents are the most connected to, invested in, and protective of their children. And we all know heroic step-parents. I'm an advocate of adoption, but I also recognize that those situations involve loss for kids. And so statistically, we can look at human behavior and discover that, indeed, biological parents do tend to do something that non-biological adults do not. It also furnishes them instantly with the maternal and paternal love that children crave and that aids them in their child development. And it's also identity constituting. That there is something innate about wanting to know and have a relationship with and be loved by the two people responsible for your existence. We know this by looking at the lives of adoptees who, even if they were subsequently placed in loving heterosexual Christian homes, often wonder, who is my mother? Why did she abandon me? Or what were the circumstances that led my father to leave, or whatever. That this is one of the most universal human longings. And these are the two adults that you have a natural right to. Across the globe, there isn't even an acknowledged right to marry the person that you want to marry. You don't have a claim on somebody else, even if you love them. You do have a claim to your parents. The other way that I explain this is, my husband and I did youth ministry for a couple decades, and when you talk with kids, when you're doing the all-nighter and it's 3 a.m. and you just wish that it would be over and kids start talking about what's going on in their lives, the things that they talk about that pain them the most have to do with mother and father loss. It is the thing that can bring the high school, college, the high school football playing jock to his knees, talking about why he doesn't have a dad, or where did his dad go, or where is my mom, or the pain that went along with a divorce. And these are things that adoption professionals have referred to related to the loss of a birth mother as a primal wound. And I think that it's certainly true for father loss as well. That these are wounds that are very hard to heal and often last a lifetime. Even with good therapy and counseling, losing a parent is painful and often stays with us for the long term. So I think you can look at personal experience. I think you can look at statistical truths. I think you can look at international law. What else would you look at?
Why not? Why not look at purported revelation, as in the Torah, the Bible, the Quran? I assume also in the Bhagavad Gita and other and sacred texts of Hinduism and perhaps other. Why not have any reference to those?
Okay, good question. So I did just write an article that came out in Federalist this morning, and they always title these things but if you go to the main page of the Federalist, it says something like, "Hey, Joshua Harris, you're the one that's messing up the church, not somebody else." I can't remember the title, but Joshua Harris was a really popular author back before you guys were born, I think. Actually, in like 1997, right? So you guys were born after that. Okay. And he was a really popular author. He wrote a book called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. It was like the #1 bestseller. It was about like why you should return to courtship and not do any dating, which I don't recommend. I think you guys should date. and be great at it. Be great at good dating, I should say. And anyway, so like 3 years ago, he kind of said, hey, I'm sorry for all the people that I damaged through my book because, you know, of the, whatever, the heteronormity or the oppressive purity, or I don't know exactly what. And then this summer he said, okay, I'm not a Christian, I'm divorcing my wife, and by the way, I should have backed marriage equality. And so I wrote an article today that is actually about why you can't get, as a Christian, you can't get marriage wrong unless you first get the gospel wrong, right? That if you truly understand the gospel and what Scripture has to say, you're going to get marriage right for a lot of different reasons. But generally, I don't use Revelation and I don't use Scripture. Even though I'm a pastor's wife, I don't use that when I'm making public policy arguments, and I don't use that when I'm talking with people online, because I want to appeal to a common authority. Scripture is my authority. Natural law and the Constitution is their authority. And so I try to use, so when you go to thembeforeus.com, you're not going to see any Scripture, right? But it's there, baby. And anyway, so back to your point. It's very interesting to me that the 5 major religions of the world disagree about the nature of God, the nature of man, the problem in the world, the solution to the problem, the nature of the afterlife. But they all have something that looks a lot like man-woman marriage, right? They all have something that resembles heterosexual marriage, because marriage has a lot more to do with being human than it has to do with being Hindu or Baptist, right? That this gets down to the core fundamentals of what it means to be human, and especially what it means to be a human child.
Let me propose what are some responses that someone make. One might say, you point to the pain reported by persons who, through adoption or others, do not maintain a relation with both their mother and father. Some might say the reason they feel that pain is because a social construct has been so widely propagated that they have been told that they should feel bad about it. But in fact, if we could do away with the cause of the pain and the cause of the alienation is the social construct of mere biological attachments between children and adults.
So I would say that's the exact opposite of the messaging that I think kids are getting. I think that when a kid's parents divorce, they hear the kids will be fine. You'll be fine. It's no big deal, right? It's just a bad cold. You'll get over it. But the reality is, we know from divorce studies, because we've been studying family structure for several decades, that divorce is really just the first of many different losses and transitions that kids are going to face. Okay, very rarely does it stop with dad moving out and having 2 different households. It's dad moving out, okay, then dad gets a girlfriend who might live with him, and then mom moves houses completely, and then mom remarries, and then dad, finds another woman, and then they get married, and then they have a child, right? And then these guys actually divorce. And I mean, that's typically more what a divorce situation looks like, and it's ongoing. But the message that kids hear is, it's no big deal. At least you still have 2 parents who love you. Boy, at least you'll still get to go to college. You're still really privileged. People have to deal with worse. I think that the message that kids get with adoption is, you're so lucky. You're so lucky to have been adopted. You should feel so grateful that you're not living in an orphanage, or that you didn't have to be raised by, a struggling single mom, or whatever it is. And so actually, this is very classic with a lot of the kids. So one of the things that we do at Them Before Us is we have a story bank where kids can share their stories honestly about what it looked like when their parent prioritized their own desires above the child's right to be known and loved by both of them. And kids with same-sex parents often struggle with this the most, because not only do they have the cultural pressure going, wow, you're so fortunate to have these two moms who love you or these two dads who love you, but then there's also the political pressure. If I speak out against this, am I going to be considered a bigot? And that is exactly what the leaders that come before us, the people that have shared their stories, who have chosen to talk about it, they have to deal with being called anti-gay if they say, I really wished I had had a dad as a kid, right? So now, saying something that has been the norm throughout all of human history, wanting to be known and loved by both parents, is construed as bigotry. And so I actually think the messages that kids are getting is the opposite of you're socially conditioned to believe that biology, I think that kids are hearing, you like what your parents have done. You like that they're in this situation. If the adults are happy, the kids are going to be happy. And I think that's really damaging because the kids say, this doesn't feel right, I'm sad, I'm frustrated, there's a lot of loss, I'm struggling with this new man who's now living in the house, sharing a room with my mother, this is difficult for me. But the whole world is saying, it's okay. Kids just need to be loved. You're loved, aren't you? So I think that the opposite messaging is getting to kids, at least the kids that I am working with, that they feel like they didn't have permission to say that it mattered.
It reminds me of Susan Norman, who's a financial advice woman, but also a personal advice woman, and she'd always put on your own oxygen mask first. Make sure that you're doing well. You know that on the aircraft, so that you live a fulfilled life, and then you'll be strong enough to take care of your children. I'm sure you've heard this many times as well.
Yeah, well, and so, that's where I think that we've got it backwards. Obviously, I do think that adults need to take care of themselves, but we don't ask kids to shoulder burdens that we can't bear ourselves. Okay, so that's where this conversation has gone off the rails. Adults struggle. I mean, when I'm not culture warrioring, I'm a pastor's wife. And that means that I walk through the infertility struggles and the difficult marriages and the same-sex attraction and the gender dysphoria of all of the people in our congregation. And all of those people belong with us. They're my brothers and sisters. These are some of the deepest struggles that adults can go through. We need to empathize. We need to be compassionate, we need to be understanding, we need to support them and come alongside them, and under no circumstances should we tell them, this is so hard for you, you should make a kid sacrifice so that you can be okay. Never works that way. The adults always must take on the burden so that children don't have to accept the burden. Okay? There are times where children lose a parent or something difficult goes on because of tragedy. That's a very different equation than an adult saying, I want something, you have to sacrifice to get it.